Hey folks, this is Jason Wright. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing with Texas Group, and we really appreciate you guys taking the time to sit through a quick presentation with us today. We're going to wait just another minute or two, allow any other attendees to join the broadcast, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Again, we appreciate your time today. We know that you guys get bombarded with requests for your time and to sit through presentations quite often, so we're going to keep the presentation relatively quick and then get to a Q&A session. So bear with us for just another minute or two, and we'll be right back with you. Thank you. Okay, folks, I'm back again. This is Jason Wright with Texas Group. We'll go ahead and get things started now that we've got what seems to be all the folks that are going to join on the conference now. Just as far as a quick background, again, Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Texas Group. We are a Houston-based cloud services integrator, IT services company, and network integration specialist. We've been in business since 2003 and essentially are almost a derivative of sorts from Schlumberger Corporation and their global IT outsourcing arm, SEMA division. So in a nutshell, our primary focus or business model was to bring enterprise-level IT management backed by deep knowledge of processes and dependable customer service, and really bundle that into an offering for small to mid-sized businesses. Give those smaller customers the same type of support that big companies experience. And so that kind of brings us today. We really started out as a managed services company, doing your typical proactive network monitoring, server monitoring, providing 24/7 help desk services. And then about 5 years ago, we got into the cloud computing space, really at the ground level of the whole cloud computing revolution, and have experienced quite a bit of success in that area over the years, and have since that has since evolved into other offerings such as voice over IP telephony and unified communications. All of those essentially data center services or centered out of our data center. So that being said, what we'll really go today, we really want this presentation again to be brief, but really informative in some of the issues that businesses are experiencing in the cloud, or folks that are looking to migrate into the cloud, things that they should be addressing with their cloud services provider. So we'll just briefly highlight a few issues companies are experiencing in terms of security in the cloud. We'll also talk about legal issues surrounding the cloud, ownership of data, that type of thing, risk management in the cloud, and then how the cloud impacts your bottom line in terms of return on investment, infrastructure, and software investment. And then, of course, what is next and beyond in the cloud. By the way, feel free to ask any questions at any time. We know that you can't always sit through an entire presentation, so Chase will certainly interrupt me. He's our moderator and marketing manager. He'll be happy to interject with any questions that come about. So one of this first slide really talks about within 2 years, 80% of Fortune 1000 enterprises will already be in the cloud at some level. Many of you know the story of Salesforce.com, which is a software as a service platform, essentially a financial services or customer resource management software. These guys came out years ago with their software as a service model, really kind of blew up over the last couple of years to be the #1 CRM in the market, and have always hosted that as a service, with them providing all the infrastructure management responsibility for the back-end core system. So that's been one good example. Another one that you could maybe relate to a little bit better is Netflix. So the movie and TV show experience being hosted somewhere else, you don't have to worry about having any equipment on site or in your home other than a DVR. You don't have to run up to the Blockbuster and rent a movie or anything. You're able to access on demand anytime you want the very specific movie or TV show that you want to see. So nowadays, it's not just so much talking about cloud infrastructure, what that really means. Most customers and business owners in the market today have a pretty good idea of the general concept of what cloud computing is. Today, it's more about differentiating what type of cloud services is right for your business, and what type of how that relates to what type of cloud services that the service providers are offering you when you're doing your due diligence. A couple of examples would be, one is platform as a service. Another would be software as a service, as with the examples of Netflix and Salesforce.com. And then, of course, here at Texas Group, our offering consists of infrastructure as a service, which we believe allows you a high level of control and the ability to manage your own environment from a development level, et cetera. So those are kind of the three core platforms that really exist in terms of the cloud today. So when you talk about some of the business drivers really behind the cloud, you may hear a term, any device, anywhere, or another term that may take you back to some of your college days, BYOD. Of course, back then it was BYOB, bring your own beer. Now it's about bringing your own device to work. With consumerization of IT really running rampant, more and more end users or employees coming to work with their smartphones and their tablets. They're really wanting to be able to access their corporate network or be able to leverage some of the corporate applications on these devices because it makes them highly flexible, allows them to be able to work from anywhere, as we certainly know is a highlight of the Generation X and Y. And then, of course, allows you a lot more flexibility in terms of computing resources. One of the big things that when we talk to CIOs now, one of their core initiatives or concerns with regards to new deployments is a term called time to value. In other words, the end user community today can go on a lunch break, hear about an application they like, and immediately go to iTunes and download it to their phone, and by the time they're back to the office, they're already able to use that application. Well, now the enterprise and corporate environments are receiving more pressure than ever, frankly, to be able to deliver these new applications and support these type of business features at a much quicker pace. In the cloud, and essentially leveraging a third-party provider who already has these systems built out, highly redundant, latest and greatest software, where essentially you plug in a price per user per month, you're able to receive those features and access to those systems almost immediately, allows the CIOs and corporate executives in these businesses to meet the demands of their end users and really supply those applications in a much faster pace than they were in previous decades. A couple of examples of how you can access the cloud. We talk about thin clients as one example. If you go back to the 80s and the mainframe days where you had one large IBM mainframe that supported a number of terminals, it's a very similar concept. The thin clients have very low computing needs, very low maintenance in terms of supporting them, and it allows, especially in free seating environments, places like schools and call centers, allows the business owner or the corporations to be able to push out applications to these customers or to these end users at a very low cost, to be able to handle and deploy policy, manage those devices and the security behind them very easily through a thin client solution. So they can essentially just deploy and push out these policies to a large scale or a large amount of devices. Of course, your typical PC and your Mac, we're seeing certainly an uptick in the Mac, essentially incorporating itself more and more into the PC world. But certainly you can continue to leverage and access the cloud and save on in terms of software, more of a concurrent user model, and not necessarily have to license every individual PC when it comes to certain applications. And again, as we mentioned, smartphones and tablets. The uptick, as I said, with consumerization of IT, that's only going to be a trend that continues to grow over the years. And as we'll talk about shortly in terms of security, we'll have to find ways of dealing with security on the tablets and phones, because consumerization is certainly driving the need to support those. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit more about being in the cloud from a security standpoint. More than half of the IT executives looking at cloud computing as a security for 2012. So when you look at this study that was done, you can obviously see that over 54% are looking at security as their highest priority. And I can certainly attest, we ourselves have recently been talking to a nationwide legal firm with over 800 to 1,000 attorneys nationwide in some international locations, and sitting with their CIO over lunch about 2 weeks ago and talking about a few projects that we're going to be looking to work with them on. He couldn't help but kept saying security, security, security. That's their biggest concern when it comes to data ownership and physical access to the environment. And when we talk about security in the cloud, that can mean a lot of different things. Some of the studies that I've seen come out really talk about physical security still being the #1 threat, despite all the cybersecurity and identity theft and identity management, so on and so forth. A lot of the most security attacks still take place, whether it be somebody coming in and sliding a USB drive into a server and downloading things, or somebody dressed up as the FedEx guy steals a computer, those type of things, or even a tablet or smartphone that isn't locked or has tracking capabilities on it. So physical security, in this age of cyber attacks, we don't want to lose sight in the fact that physical security is still the #1 risk out there. And that's why in the cloud, being in in a, as we are, level 4 SSAE 16 security or compliant facility, that's the old SAS 70 certification, being in a facility that's essentially locked down, barbed wire perimeter fencing, card key access, biometric sensors to access any door, those are certainly a must when you're talking to any service provider. You really want to check out the physical security of the facility. A few others, of course, are identity management. So going back to the deploying and enforcing of policy and username logins, access, that type of thing. Uptime availability, one of the key concerns you'll want to address with your services provider when looking at the cloud is what kind of uptime availability can they offer? Are they talking 4 nines, 5 nines, or even 6 nines reliability? They should have both physical and network redundancy built into their environment, and then certainly be in a physical location, building-wise, that can withstand all of natural disasters. And then, of course, application security, privacy, things like HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, FINRA, making sure that you can help your customers and end users in terms of compliance around those regulations. And then the legal issues. That's a big one, folks, that certainly has arisen with the push into the cloud, is ownership of data, who owns the data, etc. So as we look at the next slide, it talks a little bit more about security in the cloud, and these are some of the top end user concerns related to cloud security. You kind of run down the list there. We've covered some of these: exposure, loss of data during file transfer to the cloud. I know that one way we protect against that, certainly before we make any migration into the cloud, is we take care of handling, local backups, make sure we get those off-site. And then we have a number of ways that we do our implementations, whether it be a P2V type physical to virtual migration, or we build a brand new environment, simply import the data in. But there's always a high level of emphasis in terms of making sure that all the data is backed up before you do any type of installation. Concerns over encryption of data, talk a little bit about that. Physical security of the cloud service provider, as we touched on. Shared technology vulnerabilities, taking into account multi-tenant environments. So, for instance, if you're in kind of a, say, a hosted VoIP system, or looking at hosting your voice over IP phone system with a third-party provider, and that's a shared environment where there might be a number of other customers in there sharing those resources, you're going to want to know what kind of security measures are in place to make sure that they can't access your environment and vice versa. And then, of course, malicious activity from insiders or privileged administrators at cloud providers. I know Many of our technicians have FBI and NASA security clearance, doing business with a lot of the local city-state governments and things of that nature. You certainly have to meet certain requirements in terms of security and background checks, et cetera. But you want to make sure that you talk to your providers and understand what checks and balances do they have in place to ensure that they don't have rogue technicians that can run off with data, expose your intellectual property secrets to a competitor, et cetera. And then, of course, from a virtual and physical security standpoint, understanding how they protect their environments from the building down to the network equipment. And then, of course, identifying authenticated users and difficulty in assessing and comparing security in cloud service providers. Issues surrounding the cloud. So we talked a little bit about security from provider considerations. A company like mine, for instance, we have to make sure that the infrastructure in place is, of the highest quality, from the hardware, the software systems, making sure, as I indicated earlier, that we have redundant hardware systems where we have high availability, clustered environments, having infrastructure in multiple data centers so that if any one data center has gone offline, that your operations can continue to run in full production capabilities elsewhere. The network environment, making sure that you're not reliant on just one bandwidth or ISP carrier coming into your data centers. In terms of the agreements, you want to make sure that you have a lot of the data protection concerns listed in your contracts, ownership of data. In our contracts, I know the customer always retains a copy of their data and has the ownership of that data. So even in the event that there was some type of payment dispute that had to go to arbitration or even lawsuit, we essentially can't hold our customers' data hostage while they pay us. We just legally have mandated in our contracts we have to turn the data over and then just pursue them through legal means. And then, of course, contingency plans. We do this with a number of our customers where they say, in a worst-case scenario, you guys go out of business. What's your contingency plans? And we've got a number of plans based on the size and scope of any one customer. This also relates to business continuity. Being in Houston, obviously a hurricane-prone area, what do we do if Hurricane I comes again and hits us? What is our contingency plan? And then, of course, compliance considerations, security and privacy. We have our entire security practices and best practices and infrastructure, the topologies, and how we architect the environment, all documented and available for customer review. Industry-specific concerns, so we're vertically aligned to support customers in a number of different verticals. So we specialize in oil and gas, manufacturing, retail, PCI compliance, of course, there, and then some professional services and other types of industries. But those are questions that you're going to want to ask your third-party provider, that do they specifically support businesses of your type or your industry? Are they familiar with things, the regulatory compliances of HIPAA, if you're a healthcare provider and worried about patient data confidentiality, or if you're in if you're a financial business and you're regulated by FINRA, how are you protecting customer data? So those are things that you would really want to address with your provider. And then jurisdiction-specific concerns, this is a little bit more geared towards the legal aspect. But when you're talking about if something does happen and goes to arbitration, how's that going to be handled? In the event that it does go to lawsuit, you obviously want to handle that in the state that you're located out of. Many providers are going to have that listed in a state maybe where they're incorporated out of, and also may have language in there pertaining to, you being responsible for legal fees and things of that nature again, these are all areas of concern that you would want to address with your service provider before deciding to make a move into the cloud. Other issues surrounding the cloud, business considerations, the transaction, and we talked a little bit about intellectual property. We actually had a situation a number of months ago where a up-and-coming exploration production company who was a customer of ours actually had some concerns that a current employee was stealing intellectual property and sending that off-site to another location, and we're intending to go out and start up a new business that would directly compete with them. And they actually came to us with that concern, and we put some monitoring controls in place and also limited their access into certain other areas enough to where they wouldn't be suspicious but could be exposed for the malicious activity that they were doing, and in turn we were able to document that information, turn it over, video evidence, as well as screenshots, and give that to our customer, which helped in their case to appropriately pursue that employee. And so this is some of the flexibility that you get within the cloud from a feature functionality standpoint, but also in making a choice on a third-party service or cloud services integrator. You want to make sure, again, from a security standpoint, what barricades are in place, firewall access, username, password, that kind of thing. What are their procedures so that nobody can get into your systems or access your data from anywhere else in that cloud. And then, of course, litigation considerations, e-discovery. When you're in a cloud, you're in a shared environment, of course. From a big data standpoint, a lot of your data is in the same SAN or storage area network as other customers. So in the event that you do have to recall some type of information for any type of e-discovery or lawsuit action, how quickly you're going to want to know how quickly can your cloud services provider access and export that data to some type of medium that allows you to present it to the appropriate authorities. So I know with our solution, very effectively, we can be a keyword search, pull up documents going back 7 years relatively quickly with the software that we use. And that's actually kind of a growing concern in our client base, our customers who are being sued or having to defend themselves in some type of intellectual property or patent cases, and they come to us all the time and they need us to search for certain documentation, and so we're able to do that relatively quickly. You want to make sure anybody you're talking to as well. Moving on, managing risk in the cloud. So we talked a little bit about securities of all types. We've talked about some of the legal issues surrounding the cloud. Now we want to go in and talk a little bit more about managing risk in the cloud. And we talked about the first point there being the cloud actually lowers cyber risks. I think this is really kind of addressed on a number of fronts. I know in particular with Texas Group, being that we're a smaller regional player, we're not on anybody's radar as far as the great hackers of the world. So obviously, even security firms such as RSA have been attacked in the past and been brought down. Google, Microsoft, both in the past year and a half, have had their clouds go down for a significant amount of time due to cyber attacks or denial of service attacks. But overall, smaller, more regional-based providers oftentimes, the private clouds of the world, if you will, are not having to deal with these type of cyber attacks. We've occasionally had denial of service attacks at our data center, but going back to our contingency planning, our customers never missed a beat. We were never penetrated, and we had the additional bandwidth to handle those attacks. So within, if you think about the infrastructure, having it on site yourself, you typically have maybe a firewall. You might have some antivirus on your servers, but outside of that, most small, mid-sized businesses don't have any security experience in-house, and therefore are at a much higher risk of data loss or being penetrated from the outside. Again, privacy. So not all data is created equal. You know, big data is a giant concern nowadays. The amount of data that continues to grow within our customers' environments on a daily, weekly, monthly basis continues to cause them to have to add storage space and spend, budget quite a bit of additional funds in terms of their IT. In fact, most IT departments, their highest budget figure now is related to storage area networks and retaining the data, especially with compliance. The different compliance organizations such as FINRA, Sarbanes-Oxley are now mandating that you retain your data for a certain amount of time. So being able to decipher between what data is important and critical and would need to be recalled in a compliance situation versus what material could be discarded or is deduplication, as we call it. That happens quite a bit. So we have the back-end technology in our systems to do a dedupe or deduplication process that gets rid of data that you don't necessarily need, and therefore you wouldn't consequentially have to pay for. Physical cyber risk management, we talked at length about that in some previous slides. Breach or suspect breach recovery, again with our or with most third-party cloud integrators operating out of high-level data centers. Typically those aren't nearly as accessible as they would be if it was in your own office. And so from a risk management standpoint, you really move beyond that risk. And then, of course, disaster recovery planning and funding. Oftentimes we're working with our clients to not only help define or to not only help provide a business continuity or disaster recovery strategy, but also in working with a lot of their insurance adjusters, even their accountants for tax purposes, to be able to say, look, in terms of their insurance policies, there are aspects of that can be factored into your overall ROI model because you're not having to pay as much for insurance, knowing that their customer's infrastructure is not located on site anymore, is not susceptible to many of the man-made disasters that happen, man-made or God. And then, of course, you're not having to worry about the disaster recovery planning aspect either. So those are a number of aspects that are really critical to the overall ROI when it comes to understanding if a move to the cloud is going to be an advantageous one for you. And we're kind of winding down here. So we talk a little bit about in-house infrastructure versus the cloud. So this is kind of a recap or a summary as we wind down here, how the cloud impacts your overall bottom line. When you have in-house infrastructure, obviously you have the hardware investment, the investment in the software, you have investment in staff to manage that software, and then you're kind of in a constant cycle of refresh and replace where every 3 to 4 years you got to get new equipment. Every 3 to 4 years you're replacing your PCs, things of that nature. The operating systems of the major software companies tend to come out and renew once every, sometimes once, even twice a year. So you're constantly fighting the battle of staying abreast of the latest technologies and being able to leverage new applications or new features of applications when they come out. And then, of course, the big thing, when all this is managed in-house and on location or on-premise with a customer, if you're a growing business, you really have to take into account, well, look, I may only need X amount of computing or resources or storage or even staff to handle my day-to-day needs as of today, right now. But if you're a fast-growing business, then you really have to make a purchase that's going to handle the growth and the capacity needs sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, because you're going to be amortizing this, whether it be a straight line depreciation or however you do your however this would go on your books. You really have to take into account, if you're going to make the capital investment, you know, how big could I possibly grow, and I need to account for that growth when I'm making the purchase today. With the cloud, you really avoid all of those headaches. Of course, you really put the responsibility of the overall management into the hands of the third-party service provider, and make it their business. You know, when it comes to troubleshooting, managing, vendor management, dealing with the various applications that run your business, those are all things that now become the responsibility of the third-party service provider, and essentially get you out of the managing of infrastructure or IT business, and allows you to focus on your core business. The other thing is, these platforms are typically always going to be on the latest and greatest, so you contract and move your production into a cloud today. Well, 3 years from now, you're going to be on the latest and greatest systems, and have not had to reinvest and go through the trouble of managing that. And then, of course, from a scalability standpoint, in a cloud environment, if you need a new server, if you need to implement a new software application, if you need to add new additional computing resources such as storage, computing, RAM, all of those type of things, it's simply a call into the service provider, and much like turning on the faucet in your house for more water, they can simply dial the resources and add to your environment real time, or give you that additional server or that additional software license, user license. Of course, in your on-premise environment, it's a much more tedious process of ordering, procuring additional resources, then contracting with a company to come out, do a scope of work, plan the implementation, and bring down the systems when you're dealing with downtime. So, and then of course you make it an operating expense versus carrying that on your books as a capital expense. So there's certainly some tax breaks along the lines there. So that kind of closes things out. Again, we really appreciate you folks taking the time to sit through a short presentation with us, and we hope that you found it informative. We do a number of these events to really kind of bring light to the issues in the cloud surrounding security, compliance, the infrastructure itself, some of the business drivers behind the cloud, and you know, really consider ourselves thought leaders in terms of cloud computing. So we hope that you guys will catch us at future events where we may be able to meet and answer additional questions. With that being said, Chase, do we have any questions? Is there anything that we can answer for you folks?
We did have one question come in, but I think you already answered it. It was, can using the cloud lower my business costs?
Yeah, so I'll just briefly address that again. What we often do is we provide a financial impact analysis. So we do some financial modeling with our customers. After we come in and work with them to do the initial assessment, we want to show the customer all possible options, because in our business, and I think many of the other integrators out there, they can implement a virtual environment on-premise for you in the data center within your own racks, or you can leverage the cloud. And many of our cloud customers today, in fact, end up being hybrid cloud customers. So they are migrated into the cloud in a phased approach that allows them to take advantage of sunk costs and existing equipment, and migrate applications, and you know, in a phased approach, so that operations aren't impacted, and we're able to assess the application environment real time. So one of the things we'll do, like we said, will it lower business costs? We'll run the financial impact analysis model, and a lot of times what I'll do is I'll show a capital expense option with a customer where I give them the cost of the infrastructure, labor to install it. We'll consider all of the licensing costs in there, and then we'll also consider what it takes to keep your license up to date on an annual basis. And then we will oftentimes figure in the total cost of capital, a customer's depreciation expense. Again, we work with them to uncover all the potential IT costs associated within their environment. Other things we take into account are costs of a data center if they're going to co-locate their equipment, backups to get their data off-site, and then of course their support contract rate. What are you looking at paying to support all those devices? And so we add that all up, and we give them a total capital cost. We give them a first-year cash outlay, and we break out their costs on a 1, 3, or 5-year basis, whatever they're looking at depreciating. And then we go down, and so that's essentially the capital expense. On the operating expense side, we'll show them what it costs to leverage a third-party provider, a cloud services integrator like ourselves. Here's your rate, and it's usually a much simpler calculation because all the hardware, software, the data storage, the bandwidth, everything is included in that, as well as the labor support. So rather than in the above capital expenditure model and having multiple lines or entry items in the OpEx, it's pretty much one line item. Here's what your annual IT expense is, and then we work with the customers to compare the two. Oftentimes what we find is that there are savings moving to the cloud, but there are also many times when it's almost a like for like. In other words, there's not a giant savings moving to the cloud, but then when you start considering some of the soft costs, some of the advantages in terms of, well, my equipment on site is not redundant. It doesn't have high availability. So if I go down, I'm down. And not only that, what is my return to operation, or RTO, and how much do I lose in that downtime? If you were to take your capital cost for equipment and software and essentially double that to give you the high availability that you would get with a company like mine, then all of a sudden the cost differential tends to get rather dramatic in favor of the cloud. Again, you have unlimited data storage, so you're not having to add to that every so often. So in a roundabout way, or in a specific way, I would say that most of the time there is a cost savings. Sometimes it's pretty much like for like, very close in terms of, well, do I build it myself or manage it in the cloud? But then the soft costs and the advantages of the cloud, the flexibility, mobility, access it from anywhere, being in a disaster-proof environment, all those things then really outweigh any cost differences there. Any other questions, Chase?
That was actually the only question we got in chat. If anyone else has any more questions, feel free to raise your hand with the little raise your hand button, or put it in the chat real quick and we can answer it as well. Also, if you'd like, we can unmute you and you can actually ask the question over the phone.
Well, again, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Again, we hope you guys found this to be an informative presentation. And if we can send you any additional information relating to any of the topics that we discussed today, we'd be more than happy to. And we hope to see you guys on a future conference or a future event. Thank you so much for your time.